2020, when that BuzzFeed article dropped, the one where current and former staff members from the Ellen DeGeneres show spoke anonymously. Most of the internet treated it like just another workplace scandal. But the people who were paying attention, they knew this wasn't just about staff. This was a pattern, an old one. And if you knew where to look, it had been playing out on camera the entire time. Ellen DeGeneres built her entire brand on two words: be kind. She repeated it so often, it stopped sounding like a message and started feeling like a slogan. It was on merchandise, written across the set, embedded into the identity of the show itself. And then something interesting happened. People went back. Old clips started resurfacing, not randomly but deliberately, frame by frame. Twitter threads began dissecting interviews. Reddit users uploaded time-stamped breakdowns. TikTok edits zoomed in on specific expressions. Watch her eyes, not her words. That was the line that kept showing up. And that's what made this different. Because usually when a celebrity gets canceled, people start digging for new context, trying to build a case. But here, no one was discovering anything new. They were just rewatching what had always been there. This time, without the "she's just being funny" filter. And suddenly, it felt different. Uncomfortable. Now, to be fair, Ellen is a complicated figure. Her story includes real struggle. In 1997, she came out publicly, and it nearly ended her career. By 2003, she had rebuilt everything with her daytime show. That part is real, and her supporters still point to it fairly. But that's also where it gets complicated. Because when someone has gone through something that genuine audiences want to believe in them, they give them the benefit of the doubt. Again and again. And celebrities understand that. Some use that empathy to protect their image. Sometimes consciously. Sometimes without even realizing it. Which brings us to the moments we're about to look at. These aren't rumors. They're not allegations. They're recorded, broadcasted, publicly available interactions, watched by millions, and originally dismissed under the sound of laughter. To understand the first one, you have to go back to 2008. Mariah Carey, The Ellen Show, a live audience, and a question so calculated, people still refer to it as an ambush. At the time, Mariah was pregnant, but she hadn't announced it publicly. There were rumors, sure, but she had made a clear decision. She wanted to share that news on her own terms. Her body, her timeline. Ellen knew this. And then, on live television, she placed a glass of champagne in front of her. The camera stayed locked on Mariah's face. The audience laughed. And Ellen, smiling, casual, almost playful, kept pushing the moment forward. Because now Mariah had only two options: drink and prove she wasn't pregnant, or refuse and quietly confirm it to the world. There was no safe answer. If you watch that clip closely, you'll notice something very specific in her expression. It's not panic. It's not immediate anger. It's that exact moment when someone realizes they've been cornered. And the cameras are still rolling. Later, in another interview, Mariah admitted how deeply that moment affected her. She said she was extremely upset, that something personal, something that belonged to her, had been taken out of her control. Publicly, Ellen never issued a direct apology for that moment. And that's where the pattern begins. There's something you start to notice when you watch a large number of Ellen DeGeneres interviews back to back. Her behavior wasn't random. It shifted depending on who was sitting across from her. There were two types of guests. The first, powerful ones, A-list celebrities, people with strong PR teams, legal backing, and enough influence to push back if something crossed a line. With them, Ellen was different, charming, playful, careful, safe. But then there was the second type, guests who were more vulnerable, people going through something personal, or simply young enough that they didn't yet recognize when a situation wasn't normal. That's where things started to feel different. Take Taylor Swift, 2012. She was 22 at the time. Successful, yes, but not yet untouchable. During the interview, Ellen set up a segment with a screen full of celebrity photos and began pressuring her to reveal who she had a crush on. On the surface, it played like a joke. The audience laughed. The energy felt light. But if you watch Taylor closely, you'll notice the hesitation. She laughs, deflects, says, "Oh, come on." All the things people do when they're trying not to disappoint someone, while clearly feeling uncomfortable. Some viewers still say, it was harmless. She was laughing too. But that's the part that often gets misunderstood. Because when you're on camera, in front of a live audience, with a host controlling the tone of the room. Smiling isn't always agreement. Sometimes it's survival. It's what happens when discomfort gets turned into performance, because the alternative, saying no, creating silence, pushing back, feels risky. Especially at that stage of a career. Taylor eventually played along. She said a name. The clip went viral. People called it cute. But in hindsight, it feels different. 2019, Dakota Johnson. This is the moment many people point to as the exact second something slipped. On the show, Ellen casually mentioned that she hadn't been invited to Dakota's birthday party. The tone was subtle, but familiar. That light, joking complaint, the kind that quietly pulls the audience onto your side. But Dakota didn't play along. Calmly, directly, she said, "Actually, that's not true, Ellen. You were invited." And for a split second, something changed. Ellen smiled, but it faltered. Just briefly. A tiny crack in a very controlled expression. Online, people replayed that exact moment over and over. Reddit threads broke it down frame by frame. Those 2 seconds became a case study. Because what happened there wasn't loud. It was subtle. A power dynamic that didn't go the way it was supposed to. When someone tries to position you a certain way, publicly, and you calmly correct them with the truth, there's a reaction you can't fully hide. And that's exactly what people saw. Ellen laughed it off, changed the subject, moved on. But the internet didn't. After that, many journalists noted something interesting. Guests who confidently pushed back like Dakota were rare. But the most unsettling moment for many viewers was not the biggest one. It wasn't the most viral. It didn't involve a major celebrity. That's exactly why it stood out. It involved a child, an 11-year-old boy named Connor. He was invited onto the show because of his talent, an exceptional young dancer. He performed. The audience loved it. Everything felt normal. Until it didn't. Out of nowhere, Ellen asked him if he had a crush on someone. Romantically. The camera zoomed in. The audience reacted, that familiar ooh echoing through the room. And Connor, you could see it immediately. His face turned red. He looked down, shifted in his seat. That wasn't playful embarrassment. That was real discomfort. Visible. Unfiltered. The audience laughed. And in that laughter, the moment stretched. Ellen smiled, kept it going. And just like that, a kid's genuine discomfort became entertainment. When this clip resurfaced in 2020, alongside everything else, the reaction was very different. Over and over again in the comments, people wrote the same thing. This isn't funny. It never was. We just didn't see it back then. And that line, that's what makes this entire story feel heavier. Because none of this was hidden. It was public, broadcasted, archived. Millions of people watched it. We all did. We just didn't question it, because there was laughter in the background. In psychology, there's a concept researchers sometimes refer to as parasocial protection. When you watch a celebrity every single day for years, their show, their brand, their personality, your brain starts to build a kind of artificial familiarity, a sense of trust. But that trust isn't based on real interaction. It's based on repetition. And in this case, repetition was everything. For 19 years, the show followed the same rhythm, the same opening dance, the same cheering audience, the same warm, reassuring smile. So when the allegations surfaced in 2020, a lot of people didn't immediately think, this could be true. Their first reaction was much simpler. No, this is Ellen. That's the armor. And it worked for a very long time. But even the strongest image eventually starts to crack. And sometimes those cracks happen on camera. 2016. Sofia Vergara sits across from Ellen DeGeneres, talking about something personal, a breakup. Her tone is careful, controlled. You can see she's choosing her words. Then suddenly the direction shifts. Ellen pivots and asks a question, not just personal, but deeply invasive. Physical, intimate, completely out of place. Live audience, cameras rolling. Sofia laughs. But it's not a relaxed laugh. It's the kind people use to keep things from getting awkward. And if you look closely, really closely, there's a split second where her expression changes, where it feels like she's processing the situation in real time, trying to stay composed while something feels off. Now imagine that exact same question, asked by a male host. That clip would have been framed very differently today. But because it was Ellen, the audience treated it like harmless fun. That's the double standard many critics later pointed out. And then there's what some insiders quietly refer to as the George Clooney setup. 2014. George Clooney had just gotten engaged to Amal Al-Muddin. He comes on the show. Everything feels normal at first, until a game is introduced. A segment built around asking him personal, slightly embarrassing, questions about his fiancée. On camera, in front of a live audience, with no real setup or warning. And something shifts. If you watch closely, you can see it. His answers slow down. His tone becomes more measured. His responses turn vague, carefully neutral. This isn't confusion. It's control. It's what experienced celebrities do when they're trying to redirect a situation, without openly confronting it. Ellen keeps pushing. The audience laughs. The segment continues. But later, some journalists notice something interesting. Clooney didn't return to the show as often after that. Coincidence? Maybe. Now, to be fair, there's a point that defenders often make. They argue that television was different back then. That what counted as funny in 2008 or 2012 doesn't always hold up today. That many hosts operated this way. And that's not entirely wrong. But there's a key difference here. Most hosts didn't build their entire identity around a moral idea. Ellen did. Be kind wasn't just a phrase. It was the brand. And when your entire public image is built on that idea, people are going to measure you against it. That's not unfair. That's inevitable. And when that gap between brand and behavior shows up repeatedly across different guests across different years, it stops looking like isolated moments. It starts looking like a pattern. After the 2020 controversy, Ellen addressed it on air. She said she was learning, that she was evolving, that things would change. But something else had already started changing. The audience. Ratings didn't recover the way they used to. And by 2022, the show ended. Her final episode was emotional, carefully delivered, well-structured. She thanked her guests, reflected on her journey, acknowledged her team, at least partially. But there was something missing. She never directly addressed the specific moments, the specific people, the specific discomfort that had been discussed for years. And viewers noticed. One comment stood out. 19 years. Final speech. And she still ended with "be kind." For some people, that line still felt inspiring. For others, it didn't sound the same anymore. When Ellen DeGeneres' show ended, something strange happened. There was no explosion. No massive outrage. No final, defining cancellation moment. It just faded out. Quietly. Like a store that used to be packed every day. And then one afternoon, you walk past it and you realize you haven't stepped inside in months. That wasn't the kind of ending you'd expect for a 19-year run. Not for something that big. Not for a show that defined daytime television for an entire generation. But by then, the audience was already gone. Not physically at first. The ratings dropped slowly. But emotionally, they had checked out long before that. And that shift, that quiet detachment, is probably the most overlooked part of this entire story. Because when most celebrities fall, there's a moment. A tweet. A video. A scandal you can point to and say, this is where everything changed. That never really happened here. This was different. This was erosion. Slow. Gradual. Almost invisible while it was happening. One resurfaced clip. Then another. A Reddit thread here. A TikTok edit there. People weren't making announcements about changing their minds. They were just updating their perception. Silently. There's a comment from 2021 that went viral. Tens of thousands of upvotes. I realized I never actually liked Ellen. I liked the image. And once that image disappeared, there was nothing left. That hit a nerve. Because for a lot of people, that was exactly it. The Be Kind persona felt so complete, so polished, that it almost replaced the real person entirely. And once that layer cracked, there wasn't much underneath for the audience to hold on to. That's the unsettling part. Throughout all of this, Portia de Rossi stayed mostly quiet. Always present. Always supportive. But rarely stepping into the spotlight. And after the show ended in 2022, even that presence became less visible. No big announcement. No dramatic exit. Just distance. There were quiet reports, anonymous, as they usually are in Hollywood, suggesting that Ellen's transition after the show was harder than expected. What that actually means, no one really knows. All we can see is this. Someone who spent nearly 2 decades performing daily, building an identity watched by millions, shaping an entire career around a single idea, is now largely absent from public view. And in that silence, there's a question that doesn't have a clean answer. Those moments we talked about, Mariah Carey and the champagne, Taylor Swift and the on-air pressure, Dakota Johnson and the correction, Sofia Vergara and the uncomfortable laughter, the 11-year-old fan caught off guard, George Clooney navigating a situation in real time, and that final speech where something important was never directly said. None of these moments, on their own, turn someone into a villain. But together, they reveal something else. A pattern that can emerge when someone operates at that level for that long. When everyone around them, producers, writers, executives, benefits from keeping things exactly the way they are. When your brand is built on kindness, challenging you publicly almost feels like breaking that rule. So criticism gets softer, then rarer, then absent, until it doesn't anymore. That's not just a person. That's a system. And in a strange way, Ellen was both a product of that system and one of the people reinforcing it. There's another detail that doesn't get talked about enough. When the 2020 articles first came out, several celebrities publicly supported Ellen. Katy Perry tweeted. Kevin Hart spoke up. Ashton Kutcher defended her. And then, as public opinion shifted, those statements quietly disappeared. No follow-ups. No strong reaffirmations. Just silence. That says a lot about how the industry works. Support is loud when it's safe, and quiet when it's not. Near the end of the show, in one interview, Ellen was asked a simple question. If you could change anything about your career, what would it be? She paused. Not for effect. Not like a rehearsed moment. A real pause. Then she said, I don't know. I'd have to think about it. That pause has been replayed, analyzed, dissected. Because it could mean two completely different things. That there was too much to say. Or nothing at all. And we'll probably never know which one it was. Be kind. 2 words. 19 years. An entire empire built around them. And now, when you hear that phrase, does it feel the same? Or does something about it feel different? Because sometimes, the most powerful stories aren't the ones that give you answers. They're the ones that quietly take your old answers away.